Hello and welcome everyone to the Winning Edge podcast, a podcast where we interact with the nation's best high school and collegiate athletes to explore their experiences academically, socially, and athletically. My name is Nathan Ma, and I'm your host on today's show. Today and here with us, we are joined by competitive soccer player Chelyn Ackerman. Shay is a rising senior who currently plays forward for the Placer United ECNL soccer club. In addition to that, she's a three-time All League nominee, as well as a former league MVP for her high school's varsity soccer division. Hi, Shay, and how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you? I'm actually a graduating senior. I'm about to be a first year at Santa Cruz.
I see.
Yeah.
That's honest. That's honest. Well, thank you so much for your time, Shay. I'm excited to carry forward with today's talk. Before we carry on, though, I wanted to start out with a few opening queries so that our audience gets to know you and your background in soccer a little bit better. So, what got you into the sport and how long have you been playing? And how often are you practicing and competing these days?
So I've been playing the sport since I've been 4 years old. My dad got me into it. He played it all his life. He played collegiately as well. So he pretty much started me from a very young age, and I've been playing ever since. I started in rec, and then I joined a competitive team when I was 8. And then I switched clubs, and I've been playing competitively up until this last summer, like ending in June. And now I've been preparing alone. So I've been practicing kind of like 5 times a week, basically. So I'm preparing for the collegiate season at UC Santa Cruz.
Sweet. Yeah, I play competitive volleyball, so like I really relate to that like love for the game.
Mhm.
Um, so now that the introductions are taken care of, I want to delve into our first topic for today. So, you know how soccer is a sport which requires a lot of physical exertion? I know that on the outside the game might not look very physical because it's mainly running, but I know from personal experience and like just being knowledgeable that it's just as taxing as a sport like baseball or football. You need to be able to be strong on the pitch in order to control your dribble, get past defenders, etc. Of course, though, like any sport, soccer is very skill based too. From a player's perspective, would you say that being good at soccer depends more on your physical variables or skills as a player? Also, would you say that at the college level, which you're going to be playing at, that physicality and fitness is more important to be successful, or is it still skill and technique?
That's a tricky question. I do think that your physicality in addition to your skill are both like equally important. I think they're both things that you can learn. I think as a soccer player, it's easier when you have that raw skill because physicality is something that you can learn, whereas skill is kind of harder, especially if you have natural skill. It's easier for you to develop. So I'd say it's more of a benefit to have that skill. Collegiately, I do think again skill is important, but I think at the collegiate level you're playing with girls who are different types of ages. Like they can be first years and they can be sixth years. So you'll be playing against 22-year-olds who are 50 pounds heavier than you. So I do think that physicality is a very, very, very important aspect when you get to that collegiate level as well.
I see. So would you say that like at that collegiate level, most players are like in pretty good shape, and it's mainly like the skill that differentiates good players from like not so good players?
Yes, I think fitness is one of the biggest things as a soccer player because you can have great skill, but if you're not game fit, it's going to be very hard for you to keep up with the pace of play. So I think fitness is kind of the number one important thing, and that's something that players prepare every single season for. Like even in the off season, you're still practicing, conditioning, doing strength training so that you're fit for game level.
Yeah, I see. I see. I mean, like I play volleyball. It's more orientated around like footwork and like explosiveness. It's not really like an endurance sport. Like some people say, don't run too long, or else your bunnies will go away, or like your jumping height. So yeah, it's really neat that like soccer's like encompasses almost all the aspects.
Mhm.
So like moving on, another aspect of soccer which makes it such a great game is that it's a very dynamic sport. To kind of elaborate on what I mean is that soccer combines so many different athletic qualities. You guys need to be powerful and like have great muscle strength on the pitch, but you also need to be shifty and like have some touch. Similarly, soccer players need to have great balance and stability in addition to great conditioning and footwork. That's excluding nuanced things like IQ and instincts. I honestly feel like soccer combines more of these athletic qualities than any other sport. For example, baseball, which requires strength and hand-eye coordination, but like not really endurance. And like a sport like tennis, which needs a lot of quick footwork and balance rather than sheer muscularity. In your experience, what is it about soccer that makes you realize the need for these different skills? And how do you believe that it's made you a better athlete overall?
I think soccer has made me realize that you need all these different skills just because of the many aspects of the game. Like you said, it's all encompassing. So you have to have a lot of different strengths to be a successful soccer player. So, I mean, the first kind of time I realized that is when I got to the more higher level in competitive soccer. So whether that be like high level tournaments or join high like league like the ECNL that I used to play in. When you go up against girls who are extremely physical and strong, but they're also very fast and technical on the ball, like that's when you kind of first realize like you need to have all of these skills to be able to be a good player and a player who's going to get recruited if you're interested in playing at a collegiate level.
I see. Did you like ever have like a moment where you like noticed that someone was like significantly better than you? You're like, oh wait, I need to work on like my stamina or like my footwork or something like that.
Oh yeah, all the time. So I came from a smaller club. I live kind of far from, super competitive sports. So I played a club that was in a for a club that was 20 minutes away from me, and we were really good and it was a very fun team, but the level wasn't as high as some of the more competitive kind of clubs. So I ended up switching to Placer United when I was in seventh grade. And I tried out for their team, and that was more of an academy style club. So that was the first time I realized like all of the different strengths that I hadn't refined yet. So that's when I kind of started seeing these girls. And I remember I had a offer to play for the higher team and play for all these girls. And the coach was like, yeah, you can play. You probably won't get as much playing time because, I mean, these girls have been a part of the academy. They've been growing since they were 6, 7. So that's the first time I kind of like looked at people who were much, much better than me because I was in a much bigger playing environment. And that's what kind of inspired me to work a lot harder and try to make it on that top team.
Yeah, I can totally relate. Like my club, so like we have like two rival clubs for volleyball in the Bay Area. There's like Mountain View and like Beta Bay. And so I was on Mountain View originally, and then I went to try out for Beta Bay. And then I'm there, and like these players are like a whole different level, of like skill, athletics, and like physicality. So
Mm-hmm.
like it was like really hard for me to, do well in that club. And that was when I realized that I really needed to, work on my game, focus like not just like physicalities, but as well like skill as well.
Yeah. I think it's important too to be around players who are much better than you because it helped me develop so much as a player. I mean, I was playing with these girls who are now playing for Stanford. And it's so great to be in training environments where you're able to play with people like that because they just push you and they make you a much better athlete.
Yeah, totally. I think your like realization for like moving clubs from like a not so good club to a really good club was actually like a really bold move, knowing that you wouldn't be the best player, but like still taking that risk and that sacrifice to improve yourself so you can like catch up to those players that are better than you.
Yeah, it was hard because my dad was my coach at the old club and he had been my coach pretty much my whole life. So it was hard to kind of switch training environments, especially such a drastic change when you have a parent as your coach.
Mhm.
But ultimately, it was the best decision for my development, and I'm really glad I made the change.
Yeah, that's really neat. So, playing off kind of what we discussed in that soccer is a very dynamic sport, I wanted to ask you, Shay, as a player yourself, what are your biggest strengths on the pitch? I know players who are really fast and use it to get behind defenders well. I also know some players that are really, I should say, techie and use their touch and eyes to read the other team and make great passes. So, Shay, what do you believe is your greatest asset on the soccer field? What are you able to utilize well? And what do you believe makes your game so special and gives you the winning edge?
Um, I think one of the things that makes me a more dangerous player is my 1v1 skills. I'm a forward, so I think it's important to have a lot of creativity on the ball, especially especially confidence, because that's really important when you're taking players on 1v1, especially beating them. And that's one of my strengths, I think, personally, because I think it's fun to be creative and kind of use skills and moves to beat different defenders. I also think speed. I do track or I did track and field in high school, and I think that definitely helped a lot. And that made me a faster player. It's a really great skill, especially as a forward, because you can get in behind defense. But at a high level, it's also important to, kind of be a very well-rounded player. But I would say those are some of my strengths.
See. So are there like any professional soccer players you like to compare yourself with, like in terms of like play style or, you know, creativity?
Mm, well, I feel like I shouldn't compare myself to any professional player,
True.
but someone I look up to is Tobin Heath. Just, her creativity and aggressiveness on the ball. She's not afraid to take players on 1v1, and she is very cheeky. She's a very great player. I wish I was like her more.
Yeah, it's really neat to have like an inspiration that plays
Hmm.
so much like yourself.
Yeah.
So, I know you said you've been playing for or since you were 4, and concerning the level you reach in the sport, you're basically practicing every day, or in some cases every other day. Because of your perpetual practice schedule, you must feel like you don't really have much off season or much of a break from soccer. Like how even though your like soccer season's not quite running, you're still training by yourself to prepare for your collegiate season. This also sort of correlates to pro soccer as well. Pro soccer doesn't really have a defined off season per se, and players, even though their respective leagues may not be competing for certain months, for example, Premier League or Bundesliga, players have other commitments outside of that, such as international tournaments like Europa League or specialized competitions and even training camps. As an athlete with not much real rest period, how are you able to deal with things like burnout and athletic fatigue? How do you overcome the man, I don't really feel like training today attitude? And moreover, what's your everyday training mindset that you carry in order to improve your level?
That's a great question. I do experience burnout often, especially during school. It's very hard to balance both, but I think it's really important to remind yourself why you're playing the sport. So a lot of the times I get burnt out or kind of, man, I don't feel like training when it's super hard, fast paced, aggressive training, and I'm pushing myself to my limit basically. And that's kind of when I start to feel burnt out. And so I think it's really important to go out and just have fun. I think that's the biggest thing that's kind of kept me in love with the sport. I mean, as recent as yesterday, I felt like I was getting a little bit tired of just the constant conditioning and strength training and stuff like that. So I just went out and took shots and just messed around, and it was just really fun. And that just kind of it resets. Like that's when I feel like, okay, yeah, this is why I play this sport. But I mean, I think the mentality that I have, sometimes it's a little bit negative because I like to push myself a lot, so it can get kind of difficult because if I'm going out and I'm trying to run a certain mile time and I don't meet it, I get pretty tough on myself. But I think it's important to remind yourself to have fun and just remind yourself why you are doing what you're doing.
Oh, that's actually really interesting. Like I spoke with some other athletes and they said, or this one specific athlete, he's a badminton player. He said what motivates him, like even when he's feeling negative, is that he wants to win. Like even though like there's some not so important tournaments, there's this one like important tournament, like nationals almost, that he's always focusing to get. And he thinks like if he doesn't work now, there's other people that are working, and like he wants to be at the top, and it's not just gonna happen. It's not he like he's not just gonna get the number one spot. He's gonna have to work for it, sort of thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's really neat to get a different perspective on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so as a segue kind of from training and practices and that stuff, I wanted to talk about some of your accomplishments, most notably that your team was Surf Cup champions, one of the most prestigious tournaments in the country. Obviously, winning the tournament is a huge accomplishment, but I wanted to delve into the aspects which people don't really see, such as the round to round grind and the mental resilience needed to win each game. Can you, I guess, recall a moment in that tournament when things were really high pressure, or even a match or moment which was critical to your success? Can you talk us through how your team was able to overcome that and kind of what allowed you to make it over the hurdle?
Yeah. So that tournament was actually very unique because we played extra games and the last two went to PKs. So the game before the final, which we won, we went to PKs and I was taking one and I missed mine. and I took it very hard. I was very, very upset with myself. And obviously, that kind of sets you back mentally. So, going into the next game, I was kind of down, kind of sad. And we played the game. It was super hard. All of us were extremely tired. It was a battle, and we had to go into PKs again. And I was chosen again because I was on the PK list, and I was just very, very stressed out and nervous. And I just kind of had to calm myself down. And I took my PK and I made it, and we ended up winning. And so that's how we won the finals. And that was really exciting because, like the game before, I had missed my PK. And so it was kind of like a mental block. And then to make it, it felt really good. And it was my birthday that day. So it was a really great way to end the day. But it was a good tournament, and it was very, very tough, especially the game itself, because we were all so tired. But I'd say PKs are very stressful, especially as an athlete. So
Yeah. I think, you being able to get over that. Wait, you guys play like on this played both of those games on the same day, right?
mhm.
Wow. So like being able to get over that mental block within like a span of what, like an hour?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. I think that shows like how much resilience, mental resilience you need as like any athlete in general.
Mhm.
So like staying on the same string of social scenes, I know that on your high school soccer team you have a lot of great friends who you're super close with on and off the field. Being a high school volleyball player myself, I know the importance of having people you can talk to and have people to bond with you on the team. Similar to volleyball, soccer is a team sport, so you're constantly playing off your teammates and communicating with them. Based on what you've seen and have you felt on the pitch, talk a little bit about the importance of having good friends and good people in your soccer community that you can always rely on. We always hear about team chemistry, but why is it truly so important to a team's success in soccer?
So I think team chemistry is one of the biggest things. I mean, we're hearing about it right now with the US women's national team in the World Cup. People are saying they do not have chemistry, and that's why they're not playing well. And it's super, super important to a team to have good relationships with your teammates. And I feel very fortunate because, like you said, especially my high school team, because we spend every single day with each other at school. And then we spend the next 2 hours after school with each other every single day for a couple of months. You build great relationships. And honestly, that was like one of my favorite parts of soccer was coming to school, seeing my teammates, and then coming to practice, seeing my teammates. And we just all had such great relationships with each other. And that's another thing that kind of reminds me why I'm playing this sport is the friendships. I've been on a lot of teams, and I've been on teams where girls aren't that close and it's not as fun. And I've been on high school teams where we are the closest. It's like a second family. And you really see it in the style of play. Like you see the results, you see what happens when you're close off the field and on the field. And I think it's one of the most important things. I consider, my soccer team my family. And so it's so, so nice when you have like great, strong relationships, especially years later too.
Yeah, I can totally relate. Like with that familial aspect of things, would you say like there's like a sense of like being that close, it makes it easier to hold each other, accountable for when like, you're slacking off or playing bad. So would you say that like really helps being close to each other?
Yeah, I think it helps because you're not afraid to tell each other and like what you're thinking because you guys are so close. And some people might think it's the opposite. Like if you guys are friends, it might be awkward to like, hey, this is what I expect out of you. But I honestly think it's the opposite. I think when you're spending so much time with these people, you want to play better for them. And so when you're not playing your best, you make mistakes, that I don't want to say you're letting your team down, but in a sense, you feel responsible because these are your friends and they rely on you. You're a part of a team. So I think it's almost better to be super, super close and give criticism because they know you, they know what you mean by it, and they're not going to take it differently as sometimes often happens on teams where relationships aren't the best and it kind of causes tension. But yeah, I think holding each other accountable and holding yourself accountable, especially when you're a part of this team, is like much more heightened when you're close.
Yeah, that's I totally understand. Like with my volleyball team, there's some like I've been on some teams where like people aren't really close to each other. They really don't they're really playing for themselves, trying to, get good kills or like get good digs. When
Mhm.
really it's like a team sport, so everyone has to be a part of it.
Yeah.
There has to be that chemistry in order to win.
Yeah. And when you're close with your teammates, you guys just have so much more heart when you play. And that's a big thing too. It really affects how you play. You're really playing for your teammates, like you said, not just you, and that makes all the difference.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Oh, so like one thing I wanted to ask you, Shay, is that soccer, and this is generally speaking, but soccer is a very accessible and minimalistic sport. It's very easy to play because you don't need any fancy or extra equipment, nor do you really need an expensive facility as such. All you need is a round ball to kick, and like that's literally it. I feel like because of this very easy to play nature of soccer, I think that lots of juniors struggle with their development because they don't really know what to work on. Kind of like basketball. People only think the game is about putting the ball in the basket, which is why most people only prioritize shooting as a skill to improve on. And they forget things like defense and footwork and like ball handling. As a soccer player, what do you feel that a lot of juniors miss when they're trying to improve and trying to progress their game? On a personal note, what were some things you didn't really focus on from a player development standpoint that you wish you would have worked on more?
That's a good question. I'll start from me personally. Things I wish that I would have worked on more. So I kind of had that mindset that you were talking about when I was younger. I'm a forward. My goal is to score goals. I'm just going to work on shooting. And while that can be beneficial, I think it's super important to also work on like other things like footwork, moves, beating people 1v1, and also like kind of the simple things like passing and receiving, turning under pressure, because that's like a big part of the game. Um, I would say that that's one of the essential things to work on if I were to tell people to kind of work on things. And like I train younger kids in my area too, like in my free time. And that's one of the things that I do with them is it's super important, but passing, receiving, and just kind of the basics that will help you in a game. So, different turns, like receiving the ball on certain sides of your foot, depending on pressure. A lot of stuff like that. I would say that's kind of one of the more underrated things. A lot of the times when you go out and you train, it's a lot of shooting, like kind of dribbling patterns, which are very important. But I also think it's important to kind of go back to basics and just refine those skills that you wouldn't necessarily think of, like passing and trapping and turning and stuff like that. Like, they seem like very basic skills and techniques that people should, know. And so people don't really take the time to refine them, but it's how you move the ball in the game. It's very essential. So I think it's important to work on that.
Yeah. So like if there is, um, what do you believe is like the most important element of soccer? Like is it ball handling or shooting, or is there not one?
Ooh, well, I would say on the ball, the most important aspect is passing. Like that's how you move the ball. And like outside of IQ and stuff, that's how you move the ball. So it's very important that you have good passing technique, like accuracy, the texture, pace you put on the ball. That is super essential. Like being able to read the different lines of pressure to, see who to pass to. Um, Off the ball, I think one, fitness. That's like one of the biggest things. If you're not game fit, it's really hard to stay involved and, stay involved in the play. But yeah, honestly, I think it's passing. It sounds basic, but yeah.
Yeah. So we're essentially approaching the end of our discussion, but I still have a few questions I'd like to ask you, Shay. So, kind of totally shifting gears here, I wanted to talk about one of your hobbies, which is video creating. I think that being an athlete like myself, it's really important to have hobbies and activities we enjoy outside of the sports that keep us busy, and we can enjoy just for the sake of enjoying. With that in mind, can you elaborate on how video making has helped you mentally with a lot of your everyday stresses, whether it be with your soccer or with your academics? Perhaps there are some particular projects you've done that you're really proud of.
Yeah. So video making for me started as a class in school. So it was super important for me that I succeeded in that because it counted towards my grade and I'm very academically oriented. So I kind of got into it through that. And, it started with like school related things. So reporting on student life, like news, school related news subjects and stuff. But as I got into it, I thought it was a lot more fun to kind of start recording the parts of my life that brought me joy. So when I went on backpacking trips, it was really fun to like make videos. If I was traveling, it was really fun to kind of document my trip. And it's kind of small stuff like that. Or if I'm, skiing, I think it's fun to record clips of me or my friends, doing things. But I mean, it kind of all started also because of my sister, because she did the same thing and she'd like, make little edits of things. But I mean, it's nothing crazy, but I just think it's really fun to kind of document that because it's like the perfect way to like remember something that I enjoy doing. So I pretty much make videos of things like I mentioned, backpacking trips and stuff like that, or traveling. I recently was in Italy, so it was really fun to like document that trip and just make tiny little edits. Even if I don't share them with people, they're fun for me.
I see. That's really interesting. Wait, so do you have like a channel or anything that you post these on, or is it just for
No,
fun?
it's just for fun. I've always wanted to make a YouTube channel because I think it's fun and also just like random stuff. I'm into like clothes and things like that. So I thought I should, but I'm too private to do something like that. But maybe one day I should start a channel.
Okay, let us know. We can like give you a shout out or something.
Okay.
And so, transitioning a bit to an academic standpoint of things, obviously you're committed to playing Division 3 soccer at UC Santa Cruz, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know from previously talking to you that academics has always been a great importance to you, and that when you were choosing a college, you wanted somewhere where you could play soccer, of course, but more importantly, focus on your studies. For athletes and an athlete like myself who's trying to get recruited, can you kind of talk about your decision to choose UC Santa Cruz? What were some of the key factors that made you want to commit there? And were there any tough decisions you had to make along the way?
Of course. Um, there were lots of tough decisions that I had to make throughout the way. The main reason that I chose UC Santa Cruz is because I really wanted a good balance between athletics and academics. And I wanted to go to a school that prioritized academics over athletics. And ultimately, that was why Santa Cruz was the best choice for me. Being a part of a club who like really pushes their athletes to commit to play collegiate level soccer, it was a little bit stressful at times. The whole recruiting process can be very overwhelming. And throughout the whole thing, I pretty much just found myself kind of turned away from the whole like D1 kind of level. I went to ID camps. I reached out and emailed a lot of coaches, and I, communicated with D1 and D2 schools. I had looks from them, and I was communicating with them, and they basically communicated to me that soccer was a priority. Pretty much like you said earlier, there's no off season. You are training 24/7. You basically miss classes, labs, stuff like that for soccer, like soccer pulled rank, which is fine. But as I went through the process and especially through school, I just kind of realized that that's not what I was looking for, especially in my career path. Like I'm not planning on becoming a professional soccer player. So I really thought it was more important for me to go to a school that would prioritize academics over athletics, but I still really wanted to play. When you go to these D1 and D2 schools, you don't necessarily see playing time as a first and second year. And that was really important to me because I kind of just wanted to more play for the love of the sport, not, push myself. You kind of hear stories of people who, like you said, get burnout or even fall out of love with the sport that they have played their entire lives because of the level of competitiveness or just, the work rate of playing at a Division 1 and 2 school. But ultimately it was a really, really hard decision because, soccer has been a very big part of my life for years and years. So it was kind of hard not to choose those D1 and D2 schools. But at the end of the day, I knew my career would pull rank. So I decided to go to UC Santa Cruz because I want to become an aerospace engineer. So hopefully I can do that.
That's really neat. I'm kind of curious. So, like, what's the recruiting process like for soccer? Like for volleyball, you just shoot out a bunch of cold emails to coaches, and you start exchanging emails, and you try to like invite them to come watch some of your games. Is that how it works for soccer too?
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar. It's basically the same stuff. So when you know you have big tournaments coming up, you email a bunch of coaches that you're interested in, you invite them to your games, you send them your schedules, and you basically tell them, hey, I'm interested in your school. These are the reasons. And then you keep contacting them. Sometimes they'll come to your game, sometimes they don't. If they don't, it's really important to send like your highlights from the tournament or the game to them. And you basically just have to keep showing them that you're interested in. And that's something that's I kind of struggled with and that's one of the reasons why I kind of realized that maybe I didn't want to play D1 soccer is because, I wasn't as motivated as some of my teammates because, I just didn't think it was right for me. But it's a big commitment, to reach out 24/7, keep contact. And that's honestly one of the biggest reasons people get committed is because they are persistent and, they're making their name heard. So that's pretty much the biggest thing. I mean, a lot of people will send highlight videos and their clips to coaches. They'll call them. I know that's like a very, very easy and big way to get a coach's attention is give them a phone call. But yeah, I'd say for the most part, it's pretty similar. They come to your games, sometimes they don't, and you just keep emailing them. Oh
I
yeah,
see.
and sorry, I forgot, and visits. You can visit schools or they can invite you to come visit and meet them in person. That's also a really great way. I met a lot of coaches in person and it was very, very helpful. And it helps you get a good idea of like what kind of schools you're interested in. I thought I was interested in a smaller kind of liberal arts school. I went out, I met the coach, I toured the campus, and I realized that it wasn't a good fit for me. So it's also a lot of that.
I see. So like for some of our viewers that are like interested in getting recruited, how many cold emails did you send out? Like me personally, I sent like 30 and I got like 5 back.
hmm Honestly, it varies for people. On average, I'd say for the big tournaments, I'd send like anywhere between 10 and 20 emails, but I had teammates who literally sent like 50 to 100, which is crazy to me. But yeah, but for me, I sent less because I made them more personalized because I was only really interested in a few schools. Because, like I said, academics were a priority to me, not getting recruited just to play soccer. So I kind of had, a bit more standards of where I wanted to go, kind of schools I was interested in, areas too. Location was important to me. So, I mean, I don't think I sent as much as people typically do, but yeah, anywhere between like 10 to 20, I'd say for me, but it varies.
I see. So viewers, remember, if you're trying to get recruited, just stay persistent and don't give up. Well, yeah, we're essentially at the end of today's episode. But before you go, I wanted to ask you, in the entire world of sports, who is your greatest idol and what do you appreciate about them?
In the entire world of sports, I would say, well, right now, my biggest idol is Julie Ertz. She plays for the U.S. women's national team. She's been my favorite player since I I don't even know. Her husband plays for or played for the football team I was also a fan of. So they're they're like the power couple in my brain. But I really respect Julie Ertz, especially now. She's a mother and she's playing in the World Cup. But every single game, every single time I've watched her play, she has always given 110%. She knows that she's playing on a team and she plays with heart. And so that's why she's my idol in the sports world.
Yeah, that's really neat. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up today's discussion. I really wanted to thank you, Shay, for your time and your support of this podcast. I had a really fun time chatting with you today, and I'm sure our audience learned a lot as well.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun.